are excited to welcome everyone to the afternoon session of our virtual greening partner tabling as part of the 37th annual GreenThumb Grow Together conference. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much to our amazing greening partners for sharing your information, your knowledge, your expertise with gardeners today. So we are recording this session, but we will have the recording focused on the speakers. However, you can choose whether or not your camera is on by clicking the camera icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we invite you to introduce yourself in the chat so that we can see who's tuning in. If you're part of a community garden, let us know where you're tuning in from. And we'll also use the chat for all Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout, please put your questions there. Twywana and I will hold on to them until it's time for questions. So thank you again all so much for being here. Twywana, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to our greening partners for being here today. I would like to welcome you, as Mara said, to our 37th annual GreenThumb conference. Although it's virtually, we are still going to make sure you get all the resources and information that you need to start the gardening season on April 1st. As people are coming in, just make sure you could just put your name in the chat, and we'll put some links in the chat as well throughout the night. But without further ado, I would like to introduce Sam and Yolanda from Cornell Cooperative Extension. The floor is yours.
Great. So I have a slideshow I was going to share. Just a few slides to kind of say who we are and a little bit about our program. So yeah, let me start the slide. For those of you who aren't familiar with the New York City Urban Agriculture Program with Cornell Cooperative Extension, my name is Yolanda Gonzalez, and Sam Anderson is also on this call. And we are the two, that's us right there, Urban Ag specialist for our extension office. For those of you who aren't familiar with what extension is, it's essentially an extension of the University of Cornell, which is located in Ithaca. And there are Cornell Cooperative Extension offices in every county of New York State. And so we're located at 55 Hanson in Brooklyn, and we're co-located with state and federal partners, USDA, and also New York Department of Agriculture and Markets. And if you go to this, I can put it in the chat box, but this is a great video to kind of talk about the work of what Extension does all across the state. And a little bit more information about our program. We are actually affiliated with the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. There's another Cornell Cooperative Extension office located in Midtown, and that one is focused more on 4-H and nutrition education and is affiliated with the College of Human Ecology. But ours is primarily focused on agriculture, production agriculture. We're actually part of a regional team called Harvest New York. Our colleagues are located all across the state, and several of them focus on different areas. So dairy food processing and marketing, local food distribution and marketing, farm-based beverages, livestock processing, farm strategic planning. And the goal of all of this is to spur economic development across New York State in agriculture. And so our role specifically, we're responsible for educational programs for New York City commercial agriculture, but we do work quite a bit with gardeners and for community-based nonprofits, urban farms and gardens across the city. It's a little bit about commercial urban ag. This is a brief map of all the different operations. There's about 40 or so across the city. But then, like I mentioned, there's these other community gardens and educational projects. And so we work closely with those operations as well. And a few examples, as you know, you're familiar with this map. Of course, this is a GreenThumb Gardens map. And as you can see, there's a wide range of gardens all across the city. And so we provide technical assistance and educational programming for these gardens as well. And that's just a quick breakdown of commercial and community and educational projects. If you're interested in more resources on kind of how to get started, if you are looking to kind of perhaps start a commercial operation, there's the New York City, through the Department of Planning, has its own urban agriculture like landing page where you can find resources and FAQs and contacts and things like that. And so our work specifically, we each have some special projects that we're working on. As you can tell in my background, I'm focused on mushrooms and food safety and lean farming. Those are kind of the main topic areas that I'm focused on. Sam is focused on urban ag soils, pests and disease, and IPM. So the top right photo is a picture of wine cap mushrooms growing alongside garlic. That top left photo, there are some logs that have been inoculated with shiitakes. And over the past 2 years, there have been several workshops to kind of teach mushroom cultivation and the basics so that gardeners can incorporate mushrooms into their existing systems. So this is just a sampling of our educational programming this year. We helped coordinate a really great urban farmer to farmer summit in December of last year. And so that's this top right photo here. We also do research trials, and the bottom right, just the other day as part of the GreenThumb conference, we presented on the results of our ginger trials. And so this is what this photo is done here, is bagged ginger. So we also host cover crop and IPM workshops, and last summer, we also hosted our first office hours with GreenThumb in English and Spanish, and we hope to continue that again this year. So that's a way for you to submit your photos. If you have a question about a certain pest or disease and you want to take a picture and talk about it during office hours, that's what we're there for. And some ways to stay in touch. We send out a somewhat quarterly market goers update. It's sort of our newsletter, and you can sign up through our website. We also have Instagram. We have over 1,300 followers, and we often post upcoming events and different pictures of operations that we visited. And the handle for that is urbanag.nyc. And our website also has an events calendar where you can look up what's coming up in future months if you wanted to sign up. So that's all I have. And if there's any questions, these are emails at the bottom. Feel free to put them in the chat.
And this is Sam, and I'm here too. Thank you, Yolanda, for doing all of the slides and everything. I'm going to stay muted most of the time because I'm outside for, it's a long story, but I'm outside, so there might be some wind. But anyways, I'm also here to answer questions.
Great, thanks guys so much. So as a first question, I would love for you guys to talk a little bit more about the work your office does, or like if the Cooperative Extension statewide does with community gardens specifically. I know you guys talked about commercial farms, but let us know a little bit about community gardens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so something that we trialed last year for the first time was a monthly, I think it was starting in June of last year, June, July, and August, and I think also September, were to host an hour or an hour and a half long, or I think it was about an hour, just office hours where you can drop by and you can ask questions. It's always great if you can submit pictures beforehand so that we can pull it up and kind of create a slideshow. So that's definitely a way for gardeners to get plugged in and get their questions answered. And we recently had some IPM sessions. I don't know, Sam, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and also about the office hours, that like part of the idea is a lot of the work that we can do with like urban farmers who are growing on a little bit larger scale than community gardeners. We do a lot of one-on-one work, a lot of like one-on-one technical assistance and helping folks answer questions and figure stuff out. And it's hard to, when somebody's asking about a problem with 50 tomatoes versus somebody's asking a problem about 2 tomato plants, there's only 2 of us, so it's hard for us to be able to do that with community gardeners because there's just thousands of gardeners and 2 of us. So the office hours is really that was really one of the big ideas behind it, was how can we still serve community gardeners without without being able to do all that one-on-one work. So that's an opportunity to send in, especially for pests and diseases. That's really the central thing in these office hours, is pests and diseases. Issues that you're having with your plants. You can send in photos ahead of time, send in questions ahead of time, and then we can walk through them during that hour and try and answer your questions. So yeah, just another plug for that, is because it's something we're going to do again this year, in some form or another, I think. And thought it was a really great sort of way to adapt our, what we do to help gardeners. And then
Yeah,
Yolanda was mentioning IPM, that stands for Integrated Pest Management. So that's, again, is about managing pests and diseases of especially vegetable crops, but Yolanda does a lot of work with fruit trees as well. And so we'll have workshops. There were a few workshops recently in sort of farmer to farmer sessions. So a lot of the stuff that we do, the core audience, or like the angle, will be for people who are growing at a little bit larger scale and they're selling what they grow. So there's some considerations that'll probably be different. Like if you're just growing for home, you probably don't care so much about spots and holes and things, in leaves and fruit, as long as you can still eat it. But nevertheless, I think there's a lot of transferable stuff. So a lot of our workshops will be interesting for gardeners too.
I was just gonna add something about that. There's an upcoming IPM workshop actually on March 26th. And so I'll make sure, Mara, to send you that information so that you can cross-post and we can advertise through the GreenThumb network.
Well, thank you. So I have a couple of more questions. What are some of the major pests and disease issues you see at urban farms in New York City?
That's a really big question.
Oh,
There's a reason that we just had like 3 workshops and still couldn't cover them all. I think, I mean, I'm happy to say from vegetables that there are a handful of ones that are the most common. So like tomatoes and cucumbers get 2-spotted spider mite, which is when you see your tomatoes and cucumbers starting to get like brown and sort of dry. It looks like they're sort of drying up in August and September. It's actually a tiny little mite underneath. But that's, again, all of these things are like a whole big other topic. So there are a few pests like that. But that's one example where it's like all over the city. Almost everybody seems to have it around. And there are a handful of things like that, but a lot of it is really localized and it really depends on what you're growing. So like kale and collards, like anything in that family, there's all sorts of bugs that want to eat them. Tomatoes have all these diseases that go after it. And then there's some things that seem like they just don't get bothered, like Malabar spinach, nothing will touch it. No pests seem to, it can outgrow anything that comes at it. And like sour gherkins and bitter melon and some things like that. Okra, well, not necessarily okra, but that's a really big topic. But I guess the short way of putting it is that we have most of the same pest and disease problems that like farmers and gardeners have outside the city, and then we have a few additional ones that they don't. So we've got there's something for everyone.
Did you mention harlequin bug and squash vine borer? Those are the 2 I think that really plague gardeners that we see like commonly year after year.
Yeah, those ones are interesting ones for the city. They're like big deal in the city and not as much out of the city. The other thing, the most common question I think that I can think of from gardeners is a lot of times aphids, or people will think that they have aphids, and you do probably have some aphids, but usually aphids seem to, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the specific location and the plant and everything, but aphids usually seem to be not that bad in the summertime because we have so many lacewings and ladybugs which eat aphids. And so that's one of the things where like you might see a few, but you might not really have to do anything about them. You know, like you can just wash them off and eat the plant, you know, eat the leaves, you know, like there are a lot of pests that really aren't, if you're a gardener, you don't really have to, you know, stress about. Even the ones that are eating holes in the leaves, you know, up to a point, you can still eat the leaves, right? But
Yeah.
Thank you. So another question is, what would you say are the most popular crops that urban farms are growing?
I have an answer for that one
That's
too.
another
Yeah, the most common all over so again, most of our experiences with farms as opposed to community gardens, but even within community gardens, I think it's pretty similar, which is kale and collards all over the place, tomatoes all over the place, hot peppers. And what else would be really common? Cucumbers are pretty common, but maybe less common in gardens because they take up space and stuff. Yeah, but then there are all sorts of other things, you know. Yeah, Swiss chard's really common. In some, and then there's some that are more like neighborhood. Like in Brooklyn, we see a lot of callaloo, like amaranth, which is callaloo. And then I feel like you don't see it as much in Manhattan. But again, it's like every community garden plot's different. So that's another tough question. But I think kale and collards, most of all, those are like I don't think you're gonna find any garden that doesn't have kale and collards.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I agree.
Another question is, someone asks, can they request a workshop in Brooklyn, Queens, Land Trust Gardens? Example, like growing mushrooms?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, we hosted a summer series on mushroom cultivation. And this past year, we actually launched our community mushroom educator program. And so that's sort of like a train the trainer type of program where we're basically creating a cohort of educators that can actually go out and host a workshop. So I'll put my email in the chat, and if you want, we can touch base and see if there's someone from that program that could lead a training, because that was really the intention behind that project, was to increase educational capacity so that there would be people out there that can spread this knowledge into their own communities. So.
Great, thank you. Another question we have is, can I build raised and elevated gardening beds but know next to nothing about growing, a little about pest migration? How can you help?
So is this question essentially like, where do I get started with pest and disease like knowledge?
I think it's, where do I get started in learning how to grow food in general?
Yeah. So we have a few resources, and I know that GreenThumb has been compiling a library of resources as well, right? So I can follow up via chat with a few good websites.
Yeah, I'll put the link to our growing food toolkit in the chat.
Yeah, I think that would be a good place to start. And I think actually some of the websites that I was going to look up, we already sent to you, Mara. But there are several Cornell sort of diagnostic tools that are out there that can help you pinpoint exactly what your issue is. So it goes by symptoms, so you can kind of narrow down like what it is that is going on with your crop.
Another one that I like.
That would all be,
yeah.
Go ahead.
If you're trying to, and again, I would say like with pest and disease stuff, that's not the top thing to, you know, like the first, just start growing stuff, you know, and deal with the problems when they come up. That's what I would say for what you just described. But for pests, for like insect pests, at least the ones that are big enough to get a picture of, iNaturalist, the app iNaturalist is, it's like, I almost don't want to tell people about it because it's too easy. But yeah, take pictures. If you get that app, I think it's free, and if it's not, it's cheap, and it's a lot of fun. And you take photos of the bugs and plug it into iNaturalist, and it'll help you narrow it down. It won't necessarily give you an answer, but it'll help you narrow it down. And then from there, you can look it up. And here's another tip is when you're searching, when you know the name of the bug or pest or disease that you're searching, I like to add the word university in my Google search. So I'll add, you know, like cabbage worm university, and which is a funny search to send, but it helps to narrow it down so that otherwise the results you get are a lot of the same, like, you know, gardening, wiki gardening dot whatever, you know, so which are not necessarily very reliable sources, and they might tell you to do some stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense to do. So yeah, if you type the word university, it brings up extension and university resources, which also can have their own problems, but I feel like maybe you know what you're getting a little bit more.
Yeah, I just actually want to add, because you made me think of something. Because you are gardening, you're at such a small scale that hand picking works really great. And so it's something that is a cultural control that you can definitely do as a gardener. And following really tried and true kind of staples of organic gardening, as just making sure that you're rotating your crops, making sure that you're planting plenty of flowers that provide pollen and nectar for beneficial insects, so that you're attracting natural predators that would come in and eat those pests. So creating habitat is also important for beneficial insects that could eat some of those pests that you are concerned about.
That's a really good point. And I should mention the tip I said about putting in university for a garden scale, you might want to put university and then also put garden, because a lot of university extension programs have gardening outreach, and that will give you a lot more applicable strategies. Sometimes if it's for farmers, as for commercial farmers, then it might tell you, it might be all about spraying stuff, which you wouldn't even probably be allowed to spray, let alone, you know, want to spray in a garden. So yeah, if you type in university and garden in your search, that a lot of times helps.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. I think there's time for one more question. What are the specific names of veggies that are not harmed by too many bugs?
Oh, right. We put some of them in. We said Malabar spinach, bitter melon, and Sam, you had said a few others. I don't think we caught all of them.
If it's specific to bugs, peppers, not very many bugs bother peppers, although there's some diseases that do. Not very many bugs bother okra. There's some, like, they get some aphids, but they usually fight through it. But there's some diseases that bug. It's a lot of times it's if bugs don't bother them, then there's a disease that does, or the other way around. So nothing is foolproof except for Malabar spinach. That's foolproof. Yeah, but but yeah, nothing else is.
Yeah, to date we haven't really seen much.
Even like lettuce doesn't get a whole lot of bugs, but it's, you know, it doesn't mean that it's easy to grow necessarily. So it's mostly, yeah. I don't think there's an easy way out necessarily.
Yeah, and a lot of it's trial and error, just sort of seeing what grows well in your soils and in your specific microclimate and all of that. So definitely encourage everyone to experiment.
Well, thank you. Not sure if you want to add more. We have a couple of more minutes. If not, I think those are all our questions, and we could go on to the next screening partner. But if you want to have some final words, you can do so.
Actually, I do see one From Karen, how do I find workshops at community gardens close to my house, specifically Bedside, Brooklyn? So that's a good question. I would think, Mara, I don't know if, well,
I answered
know
it in
that
the chat.
if there are any. Oh,
Yeah,
you did. Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
but I'll say
yeah.
it out loud just for posterity, which is that in normal times when there's not a pandemic, GreenThumb partners with community gardens all over the city to offer workshops in community gardens. But due to the pandemic, our workshops are all online right now and have been for the past year. And so once it's safe to do in-person workshops again, we will. And we will post them all on our website. You can subscribe to our newsletter and get notified first. And follow us on social media to find out about them as well. We post them all over the place, and all of our workshops are free and open to the public. There are certainly community gardens that are still open and doing some excellent socially distant programming. And when we can, we cross promote those on our social media as well. So I think that's a good place to begin.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda and Sam.